My name is Ethan Miller, and 31 days ago I performed something called the 3 Nails Ritual with 4 other people. Now, 3 of them are dead, and I know with absolute certainty that I will be next. I am writing this from the basement of an abandoned building in Wyoming, the only place I have found where cell phones do not work and no one can track me. My hands are shaking so badly from exhaustion and fear that I can barely type, but I need to document everything before they find me, before I become just another accident statistic in their century-old murder game. I am 21 years old, or at least I was when this nightmare began. Now I feel like I have aged decades in a single month. I was studying mechanical engineering at Boise State University in Idaho, carrying a 3.8 GPA and working part-time at a local auto shop to pay for school. I had my whole life planned out. Graduate in May, start at Micron Technology in June, save money for 2 years, then propose to my girlfriend Amy. I had even picked out the ring, a simple silver band with a small sapphire that matched her eyes. All of that is gone now. I have not spoken to Amy in 3 weeks because I am terrified that any contact with me will paint a target on her back. My parents think I am having a psychological breakdown, and maybe they are right. When you are actually being hunted by professional killers who have been perfecting their craft for 5 generations, the line between justified fear and paranoia becomes impossible to find. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, back when I still believed the world made sense and death was something that happened naturally. It was October 3rd, a Wednesday that started like any other. I woke up at 6:30, went for my usual 3-mile run around the Boise River Greenbelt, showered, grabbed coffee from the Dutch Bros on University Drive, and made it to my 8 a.m. thermodynamics lecture with 5 minutes to spare. Professor Chen was explaining entropy when my phone vibrated with a text from Sarah Coleman. Sarah was in my physics 301 class, one of those rare people who could balance hard science with what she called an appreciation for the unexplained. We had been friends since freshman year when we got paired up for a brutal lab project on electromagnetic fields. She was brilliant but also curious about everything, the kind of person who would spend hours researching obscure historical events or urban legends just because they caught her interest. The text just said, "Library. Now. Found something incredible." I ignored it until class ended, figuring whatever Sarah had discovered could wait, but she kept texting, each message more urgent than the last. By the time thermodynamics was over, I had 17 messages and 3 missed calls. I found her on the 3rd floor of the Albertsons library, surrounded by old books and printouts, her laptop open to what looked like a scanned document. Her usually neat brown hair was tied in a messy bun, and she had that manic energy that meant she had been researching all night. "Ethan, thank God," she said when she saw me. "You need to see this. Remember how I have been working on that project about Idaho mining history for my American Studies minor?" I nodded, setting my backpack down. Sarah had been obsessed with local history ever since she discovered her great-great-grandfather had been a silver miner in the Owyhee Mountains. "I was going through the Special Collections archive yesterday," she continued, "and I found this journal donated by the Eriksson family in 1973. It belonged to a Swedish immigrant named Magnus Eriksson who worked the mines near Silver City in the 1890s. She turned her laptop toward me, showing a scanned page covered in faded cursive writing. The date at the top read October 15th, 1897. "Most of the journal is typical stuff," Sarah explained. "Work conditions, weather, homesickness. But then I found this section about something called the 3 Nails Ritual. Magnus describes it as an old Scandinavian tradition that miners brought over to determine if a mine would be profitable or dangerous." I leaned in to read the passage. Magnus's handwriting was difficult to decipher, but the ritual itself seemed straightforward. At exactly midnight, participants would go to a cemetery and find an unmarked grave, preferably one from the old country. They would drive 3 iron nails into the ground above the grave in a triangle pattern, then wait in absolute silence for 3 minutes. Signs during this waiting period would indicate the mine's future. A cold wind meant danger, the smell of flowers meant prosperity, and so on. The critical part was that the nails had to be removed before sunrise. If they were not, Magnus wrote, the spirit of the deceased would be released from their eternal rest and would seek revenge on those who disturbed them. He mentioned that 3 miners from his camp had performed the ritual in October of 1894 and failed to remove the nails in time. All 3 died within 40 days in separate mining accidents. Classic superstition, I said, leaning back. Miners were incredibly superstitious. They would not enter a mine if they saw a woman on the way to work, would not whistle underground, carried all sorts of charms. This is just another example. That is exactly what I thought, Sarah said. But then I started cross-referencing, and Ethan, the pattern is real. She pulled up a spreadsheet on her laptop, meticulously organized with dates, names, and sources. According to her research, there had been at least 15 documented cases of groups performing the 3 nails ritual in Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming since 1890. In every single case where the participants could be tracked, exactly 3 people died within 40 days. Look at this, she said, highlighting a row from 2019. 3 University of Idaho students performed the ritual as a Halloween dare: Tyler Morrison, Jake Chen, and Ashley Williams. Tyler died in a car accident on November 3rd when his brakes failed on Highway 95. Jake drowned in Lucky Peak Reservoir on November 15th, even though he was a competitive swimmer. Ashley fell from a hiking trail on November 28th, the 40th day after the ritual. Those could all be coincidences, I argued, though the pattern was unsettling. Young people take risks. Accidents happen. Sarah pulled up news articles confirming each death. The investigations found no foul play, no mechanical tampering, no explanation for why an experienced swimmer would suddenly cramp up in calm water, or why an avid hiker would lose her footing on a trail she had completed dozens of times. There is more, Sarah said. I found a blog post from someone who claims they survived the ritual. They posted anonymously, but they described performing it with 2 friends in Montana in 2015. Both friends died in a house fire that was ruled accidental, but the survivor insists someone said it deliberately. They said they have been in hiding ever since, constantly moving because someone is still hunting them. I spent the next hour going through Sarah's research, and despite my skepticism, I had to admit the pattern was disturbingly consistent. Always 3 participants or multiples of 3. Always deaths within 40 days. Always accidents that were technically possible, but statistically improbable when clustered together. I want to investigate this properly, Sarah announced. Document it. Maybe even try it ourselves under controlled conditions. Think about it, Ethan. If we can prove there is a real correlation between this ritual and increased mortality, it would be groundbreaking. We could publish papers on mass psychology, statistical anomalies, maybe even discover some unknown environmental factor. Absolutely not, I said immediately. Even ignoring the supernatural nonsense, you are talking about trespassing in a cemetery and desecrating graves. That is illegal, probably a felony. Only if we get caught, she grinned. Come on, you are always talking about the scientific method. Here is a chance to test a hypothesis. Is there really a correlation between this ritual and death, or is it just confirmation bias and selective reporting? I should have walked away right then. Should have gone back to my normal life of equations and engine repairs. But Sarah knew exactly how to hook me. She framed it as a scientific challenge, a puzzle to be solved with logic and data, and I had always been unable to resist a good puzzle. Over the next 2 weeks, she wore down my resistance. She had assembled a team of students, each with their own academic interest in the project. Marcus Rodriguez was getting his master's in folklore studies and wanted to document the ritual as part of his thesis on transplanted European traditions in the American West. Jessica Palmer was writing her psychology dissertation on group dynamics and mass hysteria. Tom Bradley was a senior in the journalism school who saw this as a chance for what he called a career-making story. 5 people total. When I pointed out that this did not divide evenly by 3, Sarah laughed and said that would be our control variable, proof that the specific number was not as important as the stories claimed. We met at Sarah's off-campus apartment on October 20th to finalize our plans. Her living room looked like a crime investigation board, with maps, cemetery records, historical documents, and printed emails covering every wall. She had done an impressive amount of research. "I have identified the perfect location," she announced, pointing to a map marked with red pins. "Dry Creek Cemetery, about 30 minutes outside of Boise. It was established in 1871 and has a section dedicated to miners and pioneers. Lots of unmarked graves from people who died before records were properly kept. It is isolated enough that we will not be disturbed, but not so remote that we cannot get help quickly if needed." "Help from what?" Marcus asked with a nervous laugh. "You expecting zombies to rise from their graves?" "I am expecting nothing," Sarah said seriously. "But Ethan insists on safety protocols, and I agree. We will have fully charged phones, a first aid kit, someone staying with the vehicles as a lookout, and predetermined check-in times. If anything goes wrong, we bail immediately." I had indeed insisted on extensive safety measures, though I was more concerned about tetanus from rusty nails and getting arrested than supernatural revenge. I had also borrowed equipment from the physics department to take environmental readings, EMF detectors, temperature sensors, even a portable spectrometer to analyze air composition. If there was some natural phenomenon associated with these locations that might explain the deaths, I wanted to document it. The date was set for October 23rd, a Tuesday night with a new moon that would provide maximum darkness. Sarah had acquired actual iron nails from an antique store in Nampa, claiming they needed to be authentic to the time period. Tom had professional camera equipment to document everything. Jessica prepared psychological assessment questionnaires for before and after the ritual. Marcus brought translations of similar rituals from various European traditions. I spent those 3 days trying to find logical explanations for the pattern of deaths. Maybe certain old cemeteries had pockets of toxic gas that were disturbed by driving nails into the ground. Maybe the iron nails created some kind of electromagnetic field that affected brain chemistry and led to poor decision-making. Maybe it was purely psychological, and people who believed they were cursed became careless and accident-prone. But none of my theories fully explained the consistency of the pattern. 3 deaths, 40 days. Every single time. October 23rd arrived with an unseasonable cold snap. The temperature had dropped into the low 30s, and frost warnings were in effect. We met at the Walmart parking lot on Overland Road at 11:30 p.m. Sarah drove her Honda CR-V with Marcus riding shotgun. Tom and Jessica came in Tom's Jeep. I drove alone in my Toyota Tacoma, partly because I wanted my own vehicle in case we needed to leave quickly, and partly because I was still deeply uncomfortable with what we were about to do. The drive to Dry Creek Cemetery took us out Federal Way, past the airport, into the darkness of the high desert. The last few miles were on a dirt road that had not seen maintenance in years. Our headlights caught tumbleweeds and the occasional pair of glowing eyes from some nocturnal animal. The cemetery gate was exactly where Sarah's research had indicated, a rusted iron archway with Dry Creek Cemetery spelled out in bent metal letters. A chain and padlock secured the entrance, but the stone wall on either side was only about 4 feet high and easy to climb over. "This is already a bad idea," I muttered as we gathered our equipment. "Noted and ignored," Sarah said cheerfully. She had bolt cutters in her backpack but decided we should leave the gate locked in case anyone drove by. We would go over the wall instead. The cemetery was larger than I had expected, sprawling across several acres of sagebrush-covered hillside. Modern sections near the entrance gave way to older areas as we moved deeper into the grounds. Our flashlights created dancing shadows among the headstones, and every rustle of wind through the dry grass made someone jump. The miners section was in the far northwest corner, marked by a small sign that was barely legible. Here, the headstones were simpler, many just rough-cut rocks with names and dates chiseled by hand. Some had elaborate carvings despite their crude construction, suggestions of lives lived far from home. Swedish names mixed with Irish, Chinese, Italian, and Mexican, all united in their pursuit of silver and their final resting place. "This is it," Sarah said, stopping at a depression in the ground marked only by a weathered piece of granite. There had clearly once been text carved into the stone, but over a century of Idaho weather had worn it smooth, perfect for our purposes, old, unmarked, and definitely from the mining era based on the style. I set up my equipment on a flat grave nearby, running baseline tests. EMF readings were normal for an open area. Temperature was 31 degrees Fahrenheit with humidity at 23%. No unusual chemical signatures in the air. Everything was exactly what you would expect from a high desert cemetery on a cold October night. "Everyone ready?" Sarah asked, checking her watch. It was 11:57. Marcus, Tom, and Jessica would perform the actual ritual while Sarah and I observed and documented. They knelt around the unmarked grave, each taking one of the antique iron nails Sarah had purchased. The nails were about 4 inches long, square in cross-section, with broad heads that showed hammer marks from their original forging. "Remember," Sarah said, "Tom drives his nail first at the head of the grave, then Jessica at the foot, then Marcus on the left side to complete the triangle. Once all three are in place, we observe complete silence for exactly 3 minutes. No talking, no whispering, try not to even shift position. Then we leave and come back before sunrise to remove the nails." "Why that specific order?" Jessica asked. "That is how Magnus described it in his journal," Sarah replied. "The head represents the past, the foot represents the future, and the side represents the present moment of decision." At exactly midnight, Tom placed his nail against the ground and began hammering. The frozen earth was harder than expected, and it took significant force to drive the nail in. Each blow of the hammer seemed impossibly loud in the quiet cemetery, echoing off distant headstones. When the nail was fully embedded with just the head showing, Tom sat back, breathing hard from the effort. Jessica went next, struggling even more with the hard-packed soil. I watched my instruments as she hammered, noting a slight electromagnetic fluctuation that was probably caused by the motion of the iron hammer and nail. The temperature dropped 2 degrees, but that could have been natural cooling as the night progressed. Marcus completed the triangle, driving his nail in with quick, efficient strokes. The moment the third nail was fully embedded, several things happened simultaneously. My EMF detector spiked dramatically, the needle swinging into the red zone for exactly 3 seconds before returning to normal. The temperature dropped 7 degrees in the same time frame. Most unsettling, the constant whisper of wind through the sagebrush stopped completely, creating a silence so absolute it felt like pressure against our eardrums. "Starting timer," Sarah whispered, her voice sounding strangely muffled in the unnatural quiet. For 3 minutes, we sat in complete silence. I watched my instruments, documenting minor fluctuations but nothing as dramatic as that initial spike. Tom kept shifting his weight, clearly uncomfortable kneeling on the cold ground. Jessica had her eyes closed, possibly praying. Marcus stared at the grave with an intensity that suggested he was expecting something to emerge from the earth. The silence was oppressive, not just quiet, but an active absence of sound that made me hyper-aware of my own heartbeat and breathing. I found myself holding my breath without meaning to, as if even that small sound might disturb something that should not be disturbed. At 2 minutes and 30 seconds, I saw movement in my peripheral vision, a shadow that should not have been there, given the position of our flashlights. I turned my head slowly, and for just a moment, I could have sworn I saw a figure standing among the headstones about 50 feet away. Tall, wearing what looked like old-fashioned work clothes, watching us with eyes that reflected our lights like an animal's. Then I blinked, and it was gone. Just shadows and headstones, and my imagination running wild. The timer on Sarah's phone vibrated rather than rang, but in the absolute silence, it sounded like a swarm of angry bees. Immediately, the normal sounds of night returned. Wind through grass, a distant coyote howl, the tick of cooling metal from our vehicles parked outside the cemetery walls. Everyone exhaled simultaneously, the sound startlingly loud after the enforced quiet. "That was intense," Tom said, standing and stretching. "The temperature drop, that silence. Did everyone feel that?" We all nodded. Even I could not deny that something had happened. though I was already working on rational explanations. Temperature inversions were common in high desert valleys. The silence could have been a psychological phenomenon, our brains interpreting normal quiet as something more dramatic because we expected it. But that EMF spike bothered me, and I could not shake the image of that figure among the headstones. "We should go," Jessica said, rubbing her arms. "I am freezing, and this place is seriously creepy now." We packed up our equipment and made our way back to the vehicles. The walk seemed longer than before, and everyone kept glancing over their shoulders. When we finally climbed back over the wall and reached our cars, the relief was palpable. "Okay," Sarah said, trying to sound businesslike but unable to hide her excitement. "Marcus, Ethan, and I will return at 5 a.m. to retrieve the nails. That gives us over an hour before sunrise at 6:43. Everyone else, go home, get some sleep, and we will meet at the coffee shop at 8 to debrief." The drive back to Boise was quiet. I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone following us, but the road remained empty. When I got back to my apartment, I immediately uploaded all the sensor data to my laptop and started analyzing it. The EMF spike was real and significant, far beyond what could be explained by the iron nails alone. The temperature drop was also documented, a sudden 7-degree change that lasted exactly as long as the electromagnetic anomaly. I ran the data through various filters and models, but nothing in conventional physics could explain such a localized and temporary phenomenon. I finally fell asleep around 3 a.m., my dreams filled with shadowy figures and the sound of hammering that seemed to come from inside my walls. My alarm went off at 4:30. I met Sarah and Marcus back at the Walmart parking lot, and we drove to the cemetery in Sarah's car. The sky was still fully dark, but the eastern horizon showed the faintest hint of dawn approaching. The cemetery felt different in those pre-dawn hours, more oppressive, like the darkness had weight. We climbed over the wall and made our way quickly to the miners' section, eager to complete our task and leave. But when we reached the unmarked grave, all three of us stopped in our tracks. The nails were gone. Not pulled out, not lying nearby, but completely absent. 3 holes remained in the ground where we had driven them in, perfectly round and about 2 inches deep. The earth around them was undisturbed, no signs of digging or prying. It was as if the nails had simply vanished. "Someone must have taken them," Sarah said, but her usual confidence was shaken. Who would come to a cemetery in the middle of the night to steal 3 old nails? I knelt beside the holes, examining them with my flashlight. The sides were smooth, almost polished, and the bottom of each hole showed a perfect impression of the nail's point. Whatever had removed them had done so with incredible precision and force, pulling them straight up without disturbing the surrounding soil. "We need to document this," I said, taking photos from multiple angles, "and we need to tell the others immediately." We searched the area for any signs of disturbance, footprints, tire tracks, anything that might indicate someone else had been there, but the frost-covered ground showed only our own tracks from earlier. As we prepared to leave, Marcus grabbed my arm. "Look," he whispered, pointing toward the newer section of the cemetery. A figure stood among the modern headstones, perhaps 100 yards away. Even in the dim pre-dawn light, I could see it was tall, wearing what looked like old-fashioned work clothes. It was not moving, just standing there, watching us. "Who is that?" Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. Before anyone could answer, the figure turned and walked away, disappearing behind a maintenance shed. We stood frozen for several seconds before collectively deciding to run for the car. We made it back to Boise as the sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed almost obscenely cheerful given what we had experienced. At the coffee shop, we found Jessica already waiting, looking exhausted and anxious. "Where is Tom?" Sarah asked. Jessica checked her phone. He texted saying he was running late. His bike had a flat tire, so he is walking. But Tom never arrived. By 9 a.m., we were worried enough to call him repeatedly. His roommate Kyle finally answered on the 10th try. "Tom left like 2 hours ago," Kyle said, sounding annoyed at being woken up. "Said he was meeting you guys. Actually, he was acting really weird last night when he got back." kept looking out the window and checking the locks. Did something happen? A cold dread settled in my stomach. "We will find him," I told Kyle. "Let us know if you hear from him." By noon, Tom still had not appeared or answered his phone. We decided to check his usual route to campus, thinking maybe his phone had died and he was stuck somewhere with bike trouble. Jessica and I drove slowly along Capitol Boulevard, scanning for any sign of him. That is when Jessica's phone buzzed with a news alert. Her face went pale as she read it aloud. "BSU student critical after hit and run. Thomas Bradley, 22, struck by vehicle while cycling on Capitol Boulevard. Driver fled scene. Victim airlifted to St. Alphonsus with life-threatening injuries." The article was brief, but included enough details to make my blood run cold. Tom had been hit around 6:45 a.m. at the intersection of Capitol and University Drive, a route he took every day. Witnesses described a dark-colored sedan that seemed to accelerate just before impact, striking Tom and throwing him nearly 30 feet. The driver had not stopped or even slowed down. We rushed to St. Alphonsus Regional Medical Center, but only family was allowed in the trauma unit. Tom's parents had driven down from Coeur d'Alene and looked destroyed. His mother kept saying it did not make sense that Tom was such a careful cyclist, always wore his helmet, always followed traffic laws. The police were treating it as a hit and run, but Detective Lisa Park, who was assigned to the case, admitted they had few leads. The intersection had no traffic cameras, and witness descriptions of the vehicle varied wildly. Dark sedan could describe thousands of cars in the Treasure Valley. "This cannot be connected to the ritual," Jessica kept saying as we sat in the hospital waiting room. "It is just a horrible coincidence. Tom bikes that route every day. It could have been any distracted driver." But the timing was too perfect. Less than 12 hours after the ritual, the first of 3 participants was fighting for his life. It matched Sarah's research exactly, down to the type of accident, something that looked completely random but targeted someone's specific vulnerability. "We need to be careful," I said. "All of us. No unnecessary risks. No traveling alone. Check in with each other regularly." "You do not actually think the ritual caused this," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I think we need to consider all possibilities," I replied, "including the possibility that someone knows we performed the ritual and is targeting us." "That is insane," Jessica said. "Who would even know? We were alone out there." But I kept thinking about that figure in the cemetery, watching us in the pre-dawn darkness, and the missing nails, removed with impossible precision. Someone had been there. Someone had been watching. 2 days later, on October 25th, Marcus had his accident. He called me from the emergency room at St. Luke's, his voice shaky with pain and fear. "I was just going down to check my mail," he said. "Same stairs I use every day." My foot slipped on the 3rd step and I could not catch myself. Fell all the way to the bottom. "Are you okay?" I asked, already grabbing my keys to go to him. "Bruised ribs, sprained wrist, lots of cuts and bruises. The doctor says I am lucky I did not break my neck. But Ethan, it does not make sense. I have been rock climbing since I was 12. I have perfect balance, perfect spatial awareness. I do not just fall down stairs." "Was there anything on the steps? Water, oil, anything slippery?" "That is what is weird. I checked afterward, even though it hurt like hell to climb back up. The stairs were clean, completely dry. But right before I fell, I smelled something strange. Like rust or old metal. Like iron nails." I finished for him. There was a long pause. "Yeah," he said finally. "Exactly like that." After Marcus's fall, I started documenting everything. Every unusual occurrence, every minor accident or piece of bad luck among our group. What emerged was a pattern too consistent to be coincidence. Sarah's laptop crashed the next day. The hard drive completely fried, despite being only 6 months old. She lost 3 weeks of research and had to reconstruct her thesis proposal from memory. The night after that, her car battery died. When she got it jumped, the alternator failed. When she got that fixed, the starter went out. 3 major car problems in 3 days, in a vehicle she had just had serviced. Jessica developed severe food poisoning from a restaurant she ate at regularly, the only customer to get sick despite dozens of people ordering the same dish. While recovering from that, she cut herself badly while cooking, a knife slipping in a way she could not explain. The cut required 7 stitches and became infected despite proper care. I was not immune either. My apartment's smoke detector started going off randomly, always between 2 and 4 a.m. The landlord found nothing wrong with it. I nearly got hit by a car that ran a red light, missing me by inches. A shelf in my apartment collapsed, sending heavy textbooks crashing down where I had been sitting moments before. Small things individually, but together they formed a clear escalation. Jessica, ever the psychologist, created a detailed spreadsheet tracking every incident. Date, time, person affected, severity, and any unusual circumstances. She also included a control group, 5 random students from our classes who she monitored through social media and casual observation. The results were undeniable. In the week following the ritual, our group experienced 47 documented incidents of bad luck, accidents, or equipment failures. The control group experienced 2. More disturbing was the pattern of escalation. The incidents were becoming more serious, more targeted. Tom, the cyclist, hit while cycling. Marcus, the climber with perfect balance, falling down stairs. Sarah, who depended on technology, experiencing cascading equipment failures. Jessica, the health-conscious one, getting food poisoning and infections. And me, the careful one who always planned for safety, having all my safety equipment fail. On October 28th, day 5, everything changed. Tom died. His parents called Sarah, the only one of us they had met. The call came at dinner time, and I watched the color drain from Sarah's face as she listened. When she hung up, she could barely speak. "Blood clot," she whispered. "From the injuries. It traveled to his brain. He never woke up." We sat in stunned silence. Tom was gone. 22 years old, brilliant writer, devoted son, loyal friend. Gone because of a ritual we had performed as an academic exercise. The funeral was 3 days later, Halloween of all days. We all attended, sitting together in the back of the church, trying not to think about how we were partially responsible for the grieving family in the front row. Tom's journalism professor spoke about his promising future, his dedication to truth, his gift for finding the human story behind the facts. His younger sister read a poem Tom had written for her high school graduation that left everyone in tears. His parents looked hollow, aged a decade in a week. His mother approached us after the service, thanking us for being Tom's friends, saying how much he had enjoyed working on the project with us. If only she knew that project had killed him. That night, we gathered at my apartment. The walls were now covered with Sarah's research, Jessica's spreadsheets, Marcus's folklore comparisons, and my scientific data. It looked like the headquarters of a conspiracy theorist, but we were past caring about appearances. "We need to accept what is happening," Marcus said. "The ritual is real, the pattern is real, and if we do not find a way to break it, 2 more of us are going to die." "But how is it real?" Jessica demanded. "Curses do not exist. Ghosts do not cause blood clots. There has to be a logical explanation." "What if it is not supernatural?" I said slowly. An idea that had been forming since the cemetery. What if someone is watching these rituals and then orchestrating the deaths? "That is insane," Sarah said. "You are talking about serial killers who somehow know when people perform an obscure mining ritual." "Think about it," I insisted. "The missing nails, that figure we saw in the cemetery. What if there is a group that monitors old cemeteries, watches for people performing the ritual, then hunts them? Makes their deaths look like accidents?" "Why would anyone do that?" Marcus asked. I turned to my laptop and pulled up the research I had been doing. Property records for Dry Creek Cemetery led to something called the Erickson Family Trust, established in 1889. The trust owns 17 cemeteries across Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. All old, all with sections dating to the mining era. All sites where 3 nails ritual deaths had occurred. "Erickson," Sarah said, Like Magnus Eriksson, who wrote about the ritual. Exactly. What if his descendants had been maintaining this tradition for over a century, using the ritual to select victims, then killing them in ways that look accidental? You are suggesting a multi-generational conspiracy of killers, Jessica said. That is even crazier than believing in curses. Is it? I pulled up newspaper archives I had found. Look at this. October 1894, 3 Swedish miners die in separate accidents after reportedly disturbing an old grave. October 1901, 3 railroad workers die within 40 days of each other, following a drunken dare in a cemetery. October 1909, 3 ranch hands found dead in unrelated incidents after being seen in Dry Creek Cemetery at midnight. The pattern goes back over a century. Always in October, always 3 deaths, always after someone performs this specific ritual. That is not supernatural. That is organized. We spent the next week trying to find evidence to support my theory. Sarah dove into genealogical records, tracing the Eriksson family tree. Marcus interviewed older residents who might remember stories about the cemeteries. Jessica created psychological profiles of what kind of person would maintain such a tradition. I worked on documenting how our accidents could have been orchestrated. What we found was disturbing. The Eriksson family had deep roots in the region, with members in law enforcement, medical fields, and local government. They owned businesses that gave them access to vehicles, tools, and chemicals. They had the means and knowledge to make murder look accidental. On November 5th, day 13, I made a breakthrough. Hidden in the cemetery's tax records was a line item for security services paid to a company called Northern Heritage Protection. That company was registered to an address that turned out to be a P.O. box, but the corporate filings listed the president as Christina Eriksson. I decided to surveil Dry Creek Cemetery, convinced someone was watching it. I borrowed a hunting camera from a friend, one with night vision and motion activation, and hid it in a tree overlooking the miners section. Then I waited. 2 nights later, the camera captured something. A figure in dark clothing walking through the cemetery at 2 a.m., checking specific graves, including the one where we had performed the ritual. The image quality was not good enough for identification, but it proved someone was monitoring the site. On November 9th, day 17, Marcus had his second near-death experience. He was at a gas station filling up his Honda when the pump malfunctioned. Gasoline sprayed everywhere, soaking him and creating a massive puddle. By all rights, a single spark should have turned him into a human torch, but miraculously, no ignition occurred. The station's emergency shutoff worked. Marcus was able to wash off in the bathroom, and aside from chemical burns on his hands, he was okay. The investigation found that the pump's safety mechanisms had been tampered with. Someone had deliberately created a potentially lethal malfunction. That is when I noticed we were being herded. Each incident pushed us toward isolation. Marcus stopped driving after the gas station incident. Jessica moved back with her parents after someone broke into her apartment. Nothing stolen, but everything searched. Sarah stopped attending classes after a window air conditioning unit fell from a building, missing her by inches. We were being hunted, systematically and professionally. On November 12th, day 20, Jessica died. She was at her parents' house in Meridian, supposedly safe. Her father, a retired Boise police officer, had installed a comprehensive security system after hearing about our situation. Cameras, alarms, motion sensors, the works, but somehow, someone got inside. Jessica had a severe peanut allergy, something she had managed carefully her entire life. She carried 2 EpiPens everywhere and was meticulous about checking food labels. That night, she ate dinner with her family, the same meal everyone was eating. Within minutes, she went into anaphylactic shock. Her first EpiPen failed to deploy. The mechanism jammed with something that looked like superglue. Her backup was missing from her purse. Her father tried to perform an emergency tracheotomy, but by the time the paramedics arrived, it was too late. The autopsy found concentrated peanut oil in her food, but only on her plate. Someone had deliberately contaminated her meal and sabotaged her medication. The security system showed no intrusions, suggesting either an inside job or someone with sophisticated knowledge of bypassing alarms. 2 down, 1 to go. Sarah and I knew one of us would be next. We had 20 days left until the 40-day mark, the outer limit of the pattern. We decided to go into hiding together, constantly moving, paying cash, using fake names. We bought prepaid phones, created false identities, tried to disappear. But they found us anyway. The first photo appeared under my windshield wiper at a truck stop in Mountain Home. It showed Sarah and me sleeping in our motel room, taken from inside the room just hours earlier. On the back was written, November 20, 3:33 a.m. EM. The next photo came 2 days later, slipped under our motel room door in Twin Falls. This one showed Sarah at a gas station we had stopped at just 20 minutes earlier. The timestamp on the back read, November 18/11, 47 p.m. SC, Sarah's initials and her death date. We were being watched constantly, tracked despite all our precautions. Every few days, new photos would appear in impossible places. Inside locked cars, sealed food containers, even tucked between pages of a book I was reading, always showing us from angles that should have been impossible, always with those death dates written on the back. On November 15th, day 23, desperation drove us to try something crazy. We went to the FBI field office in Boise with everything we had compiled. The cemetery records, the Erickson family connections, the photos, the pattern of deaths going back over a century. Special Agent Patricia Wong listened patiently as we laid out our case. She took notes, examined our evidence, and asked probing questions. For a moment, I thought we might actually get help. Then she leaned back and gave us the look I had come to dread. The look that said she thought we were delusional college students who had scared ourselves with a Halloween prank gone wrong. What you are describing, she said carefully, is a series of unfortunate accidents and coincidences that you are connecting through confirmation bias. These photos could be from anyone, a stalker, an ex-boyfriend, even one of you trying to maintain the delusion. Without concrete evidence of interstate criminal activity, there is nothing the FBI can do. People are dead, Sarah said, her voice breaking. Jessica and Tom are dead. From accidents, Agent Wong replied. Tragic accidents that were thoroughly investigated by local authorities. No evidence of foul play was found. We left the federal building defeated. The system that was supposed to protect us saw only coincidences where we saw clear patterns. Without bodies showing obvious signs of murder, without clear evidence of conspiracy, we were on our own. November 18th arrived with an early winter storm. Sarah and I were holed up in a motel outside Mountain Home, the furthest we could get from Boise, while still staying in Idaho. We had barricaded the door, set up motion sensors, and took turns staying awake to watch for intruders. At 10 p.m., Sarah started coughing. Within seconds, she was gasping for air, clawing at her throat. I smelled it then, a sweet chemical odor seeping from the heating vents. Gas. Someone was pumping gas into our room. I tried to open the door, but it would not budge. The handle turned, but something was blocking it from the outside. The windows were painted shut, a violation of fire code I had not noticed when we checked in. Sarah collapsed, her lips turning blue. In desperation, I grabbed a chair and smashed it through the window. Cold air rushed in, diluting the gas, but I could hear footsteps in the hallway, multiple sets, moving with military precision. I dragged Sarah to the window and pushed her through, following immediately after. We hit the ground hard, both of us bleeding from cuts caused by the broken glass. Sarah was barely conscious, but breathing. "Run," I told her, pulling her to her feet. We stumbled toward the parking lot, but 3 figures in dark clothing emerged from the shadows. They moved calmly, confidently, like predators who knew their prey was already caught. That is when Sarah did something I will never forget. Despite being half-conscious from gas inhalation, she pulled out her phone and started live streaming on Instagram. "Help us," she gasped into the camera. "Mountain Home Motor Lodge, Highway 30. 3 people trying to kill us. This is not a joke. They killed Tom and Jessica. They are going to kill us. Please, someone call for help." Within seconds, dozens of people were watching. The viewer count climbed rapidly as her followers shared the stream. 50 viewers, then 100, then 500. Comments flooded in, some thinking it was a prank, others recognizing the genuine terror in our faces. The 3 figures stopped their advance. I could not see their faces clearly, but their body language showed uncertainty. They had not expected this. Their whole system depended on secrecy, on deaths that looked accidental. But now, hundreds of people were witnessing their hunt in real time. One of them, a woman by her build, spoke. Her voice was calm, cultured, with a slight accent I could not place. "You have complicated things unnecessarily," she said. "This was supposed to be clean, traditional. You have broken the pattern." Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone watching the stream had called 911. The 3 figures exchanged glances, then melted back into the shadows with practiced ease. By the time the police arrived, they were gone. Sarah and I were taken to the hospital for treatment, gas exposure and cuts from the window, but we would survive. The police found evidence of tampering with the motel's heating system. The door had been barricaded from outside, and there were fresh tire tracks from vehicles that had left in a hurry. But no suspects, no identifications. The motel's security cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned during the crucial time period. The only evidence was Sarah's live stream, which the police dismissed as too chaotic and dark to be useful. We had survived November 18th. Sarah's death date had passed without her dying. The pattern was broken. 2 days later, November 20th, my designated death date passed without incident. We stayed in the hospital under police protection, though I knew it was more to humor us than from any real belief in our story. On November 21st, I found a letter in my jacket pocket. I had not left the hospital, had not worn that jacket since arriving, yet there it was. Expensive paper, elegant handwriting, sealed with wax bearing a symbol I did not recognize. "Dear Mr. Miller, you have disrupted a tradition that has endured for 130 years. The 3 nails ritual has been the cornerstone of my family's purpose since my great-great-grandfather Magnus established the parameters. 3 souls for 3 nails, maintaining the balance that keeps the darkness at bay. You see it as murder. We see it as necessary sacrifice. Every generation, people test the boundaries between the living and the dead. They play with forces they do not understand, treating sacred things as entertainment. The ritual identifies these individuals and ensures they pay the price for their disrespect. But you and Miss Coleman have broken the pattern. 2 were taken, but 2 survived. This has never happened in 13 decades of tradition. The balance is disrupted. The compact is broken. My family is divided on how to proceed. Some wish to hunt you down and complete the pattern by any means necessary. Others believe your survival indicates the old ways are ending, that we must adapt or abandon our purpose. I have argued for a third option. You have proven yourself through survival. You understand the weight of what you have experienced. You could join us, help us modernize our methods, ensure the tradition continues in a form suited to the modern world. Consider this carefully. You can spend your life running, always looking over your shoulder, never knowing peace. Or you can become part of something greater than yourself, a guardian of the boundary between worlds. If you are interested, place a white rose on Tom Bradley's grave at midnight on November 30th. Come alone. We will be watching. If you choose to run, know that some of my family will never stop hunting you. You are an anomaly, a survivor who should not exist. That makes you dangerous to everything we have built. Choose wisely. Christina Erickson, matriarch of the Northern tradition. I showed the letter to Sarah. She read it twice, then looked at me with haunted eyes. They want us to join them, she said, to help them kill people. They want us to understand, I corrected, to see their perspective. Their perspective is murder, Ethan. They killed Tom and Jessica. They tried to kill us. I know, I said. But what is our alternative? Run forever? Always wondering when they will find us? We go public, Sarah said. Tell everyone. Post the whole story online. Make it impossible for them to operate in secret. And who would believe us? I asked. We sound like conspiracy theorists, without proof. We have proof. The live stream, the letter, our research. But I knew it was not enough. The live stream was too dark and chaotic to prove anything. The letter could be dismissed as a hoax. Our research showed patterns but not definitive connections. We had survived, but we had not won. November 30th came too quickly. Sarah and I had been released from the hospital but remained in Boise, unsure where to go or what to do. The police had closed their investigation, finding no actionable evidence. Tom and Jessica's families had buried their children and moved on, never knowing the truth about why they died. At 11 p.m. on November 30th, I made my decision. I drove to the cemetery alone, despite Sarah's protests. Tom's grave was in the new section, a polished granite headstone that read "Beloved son, brother, and friend." Fresh flowers from his family surrounded it, along with notebooks and pens left by his journalism classmates. I placed a white rose on the center of his grave at exactly midnight. She appeared within seconds, as if she had been waiting nearby. Christina Erickson was not what I had expected. Mid-50s, elegant, with silver-streaked hair and intelligent eyes. She looked like a college professor or successful businesswoman, not a generational serial killer. "Mr. Miller," she said warmly, "I am so pleased you came. I was beginning to think the old ways truly were ending." "Why?" I asked. "Why maintain this tradition? What possible purpose does it serve?" She smiled, a teacher pleased by a student's question. "Do you know what my great-great-grandfather Magnus found when he came to America? Chaos. Miners dying by the dozens in preventable accidents because they ignored the mountain's warnings. Men who spat in the face of forces they did not understand. So he created the ritual as a test. Those who would desecrate graves for profit or entertainment marked themselves as lacking the reverence necessary for survival. The mountain, the earth itself, demanded payment for such disrespect. You are saying he killed them. I am saying he established a covenant. Those who disturbed the dead joined the dead. It maintained balance, prevented greater catastrophes. Every culture has such traditions, Mr. Miller. Ours simply adapted to the new world. And your family has been murdering people ever since." Her expression hardened. "We have been maintaining the balance. Do you know how many would-be grave robbers have been deterred by our tradition? How many sacred sites remain untouched because people fear the consequences? We are guardians, not murderers. Tell that to Tom and Jessica. They chose to participate. Every action has consequences. But you survived, which means the old pattern is breaking. The question is, what comes next?" She gestured to the cemetery around us. The world has changed since Magnus's time. Cameras everywhere, DNA evidence, digital footprints. Maintaining the tradition becomes harder each year. We need fresh perspectives, new methods. You want me to help you modernize murder. I want you to help us evolve. The core purpose remains protecting sacred spaces from defilement, but perhaps the methods can change. Less lethal consequences, more psychological deterrence. You survived because you were clever, cautious, respectful even in your skepticism. These are qualities we value. And if I refuse, then you leave here and never return. Some of my family will always see you as a threat, an anomaly that should be corrected. But I will ensure they do not act on those impulses. You have earned that much through your survival. I stood there among the graves, wrestling with an impossible choice. Join the killers who had destroyed my life, or spend that life always running from them. I need time to think, I said finally. Christina smiled. Of course. You have until the winter solstice. If you wish to join us, return here at midnight on December 21st. If not, I suggest you leave Idaho and never come back. She walked away, disappearing into the darkness between headstones. I stood at Tom's grave for a long time, wondering what he would want me to do. Would he want revenge? Justice? Or would he want me to find a way to prevent others from suffering his fate? I returned to Sarah and told her everything. She was furious that I had gone alone, terrified of what they might ask of us. We spent the next 3 weeks debating, arguing, planning. In the end, we made different choices. Sarah chose to run. She packed everything, created a new identity, and disappeared. The last I heard, she was somewhere on the East Coast, working under an assumed name, trying to build a life free from the shadow of that October night. I do not blame her. Perhaps she made the wiser choice. I chose to stay. On December 21st, I returned to the cemetery. Christina was waiting, along with 2 others I did not recognize. The ceremony was simple. I swore an oath to protect the sacred spaces, to maintain the balance between the living and the dead, to evolve the tradition for a new age. They taught me their history, their methods, their purpose. I learned about other families in other regions, all maintaining similar traditions. The carpenters in New England who ensure lost hikers stay lost. The fishers along the Gulf Coast who feed the ocean its due. The gardeners in California who tend groves best left undisturbed. But I also pushed for change. Less death, more deterrence. Using technology to warn people away rather than hunt them down. Creating urban legends that keep people safe through fear rather than killing those who transgress. It has been a year since that night in Dry Creek Cemetery. The 3 nails ritual is still performed occasionally by thrill seekers and skeptics. But now, instead of automatic death sentences, they receive warnings, photographs showing them at vulnerable moments, evidence of how easily they could be reached. Most are smart enough to heed the message. Some are not. Some insist on testing the boundaries, on desecrating what should remain untouched. For them, the old ways still apply. 3 nails, 3 deaths, 40 days. The pattern continues, evolved but unbroken. I know what you are thinking. How can I participate in this? How can I help maintain a tradition built on murder? Because I have seen what happens when sacred boundaries are not enforced, when people lose all reverence for death, for history, for forces beyond their understanding. The Erickson family and others like them are monsters, yes, but they are monsters that keep worse things at bay. And because I remember Tom and Jessica, their deaths were senseless, cruel, wasteful. But if my position within the tradition can prevent others from suffering the same fate, if I can modernize these ancient covenants to be less bloody, then perhaps their sacrifice serves a purpose. My name is Ethan Miller. I was a mechanical engineering student who thought the world operated by logic and reason alone. Now I know better. Now I help maintain the balance between the rational and the sacred, between the living and the dead, between tradition and evolution. If you find this account, if you are researching the 3 nails ritual, know this. It is real, but not in the way you think. It is not supernatural, but it is ancient. It is not a curse, but it is a covenant, and it is protected by people who have turned judgment into tradition and tradition into purpose. Do not perform the ritual. Do not test the boundaries. Do not disturb what rests in peace. Because we are watching, we are always watching. And while the methods may evolve, the fundamental truth remains. Those who disrespect the dead risk joining them. Some patterns are meant to be broken. Others are meant to endure. Choose wisely which one you want to test. The Erickson family sends their regards